Hey folks, haven't posted in like a long time. And making this basically for anybody who generally does follow my channel or cares. I'm not some big celebrity, and I really I don't make all that much high quality content to begin with. I mean, I'm not some sort of you know I guess you could say true content creator. I'm just sort of vlogging my life and my struggles and things I'm working on, and this, that, and the other stuff that's going on in my life. And that's been basically it, mostly centered around NoFap. But then there are all sorts of issues that tie into that, which I end up discussing. But just trying to update anybody who does care. I'm sure nobody's been biting their fingernails over what's going on in my life, but in case that is the case, there's a lot to talk about. I know last time I posted about how my mother was, on the verge of death from pancreatic cancer. She did pass on the 8th of July. My dad said it was 7:52 p.m. I was actually on the way out of the house when that occurred, and I got there, obviously when she was already gone. But I may one day make a video talking about that in the sense of giving like a eulogy, but I'm really not in the mood for that. I've shed enough tears over that. I know that it's not going to do any good, and I don't really want to revisit it and dwell on it. It's something that, to be honest with you, I kind of saw coming from at least a decade or two ago. And kind of like being Cassandra of Troy, I almost like cursed with giving true prophecies and having nobody listen to me. Though I was more like generally speaking, saying, hey, the way the family's running is not sustainable. Somebody's gonna go. I thought it was gonna be my dad first, but anyways, I spent the last I think it's been about 3 months. Yeah, it's a little over 3 months. I've spent the last like 3 months essentially trying to make my peace with that and move on from things. I really hope you can tell me if it's working or not, but I have the phone set up in a certain way. I really hope the speaker is picking up what I'm saying. But what are they gonna say? So I spent the last 3 months adjusting to that, taking my courses. I'm still unemployed. I'm drawing unemployment benefits. Theoretically those will run out in like April next year. So I do have some time to look for a job. I'm more focused on my courses because for one thing, the only jobs I could get are very manual labor type, and I already have carpal tunnel from my probably from my last job, and I want to get those sorts of things fixed up before I do get another job. And I've been realizing more and more, I mean, what engineering actually looks like in biotech space, and what it really would take to get into that. And continuing on with like manufacturing technician jobs, it's like I'll do that if it's a matter of starvation / homelessness versus having a stable income. But you keep doing that for more than a few years after graduating with an engineering degree, like you're getting set in that track, and it gets that much harder to break out of it. And of course the question arises, like, hey, if I was just gonna be a technician, which by the way, a lot of these companies, they hire high school graduates. So then it's like, okay, again, I'll do it if it's a matter of starvation versus not starvation, or homelessness versus not homelessness. But the question then arises, then why the heck did I waste I mean, it would be essentially a waste 10 years struggling through all the domestic abuse and all that stuff, and my own issues with studying and the class so taking, how hard they were and whatnot, and the stress and the strain and the the negative effects on my physical and mental health, and all the conflict I ran into in undergrad. Like, why would I go and do all of that, the relational aggression and whatnot? Why would I go do all of that to get an engineering degree if I was just going to end up working at a job where they hire people with a high school diploma? Like, why would I go do that? which is kind of like why I needed to get a real strong background in software engineering. Not just programming, but actual, like, design. I need that master's degree, and I swear, like, at that point, if I get that master's degree and stuff still ain't working, then I'm gonna seriously think, like, not only is the education system truly broken, but I'm gonna have to really rethink my entire life and my approach to this sort of stuff, because, like, a lot of it is the classic, I did what I was told. I followed the program, so to speak, and, like, I'm not sitting here with, like, a worthless, like, let's say, the stereotype nowadays is the gender studies degree or the philosophy degree or the psychology degree. I'm not sitting there with something like that where, I didn't study something that was, useful or so. Though, I will say, since I haven't really used a lot of it because of the level of work I've been doing, honestly, I have kind of forgotten, 90 to 95% of what I actually learned in a lot of those engineering classes, because you don't use it when you're doing a job like this. Heck, I'm sure you probably don't even use it when you're doing an actual engineering job. It's hey, you know how to write macros for a spreadsheet. But anyways, putting that aside, there were some things I wanted to talk about. I gotta get caught up on some stuff in my classes, which I've been derailed from because of some of the stuff that's been revealed recently to me about, even more dark family secrets. For one thing, if you've followed any of the previous videos from before my mother's illness, and eventually her passing, I talked about how, like, 20 years after the fact, my sister and my youngest cousin were able to, like, build up the courage to actually come forward and talk about how they were sexually abused by a cousin of ours, who we had, brought into the country and allowed to live with us. And my father had done that. The old chain migration system, that's what they used. But I think it was like last Friday or Saturday, I ended up talking to his older brother, who, they're one of my cousins. I haven't talked to him in like 16, 17 years. And there are reasons why I haven't. It has nothing to do with anything that he did or said. It has more to do with my parents. But he revealed to me that his younger brother had also spilled the beans even further and said that, that scumbag cousin's father had also done the same things to him. So of course there's this question of, like, beyond just the, what WTF, it's like, well, how far down does this go? Who else is involved? Who else has done these things in the family? How rampant is this? How normalized has it been? And I confronted my father with some things that he's done to me, particularly recently, which would fall under the same sort of umbrella term, but I don't know. Based off of some of the comments that that he and this cousin's father, and by that I mean not the father of not the father who is a molester, whose son is the cousin who did all this other molestation, but the father of the victims, who's the middle brother. The oldest brother is also a molester, and there's rumors that he molested his son, who then became a molester. So cycle of abuse there. But the middle brother, who is the father of the youngest cousin, who's victim, and the stuff that my dad has said, it's almost like this cultural attitude with them where, like, oh, that's just the norm, like, you go, they gave an example, like, you go to a store and the store owner asks to see your junk, your Johnson, and it's like, oh, that's just what they do. And it's like, no, that's actually CSA. assuming that obviously the person, the victim is a kid, then they're a child, therefore it's CSA, but either way it's SA at the very least, falls in that general umbrella, like that's, and things that my dad has done, which, may have seen the culture, the norm for him, but, being that he's not in that country, is over here, we, regardless of the flaws of our legal system and flaws in our culture, we're at least able to have a dialogue about these things. And I think that's a sign of like some virtue over here, but like, he may have done those things not with the intention, thinking that it was normal, but it's not, and it's not okay. Even if it was normal, it's still not okay. So I had to confront him on that sort of stuff, and he did apologize. I think only because like my cousin was there, and he's been very much an advocate for, the victims in our family. And his younger brother, who's, probably the biggest victim, if you could quantify that, it. Not saying you can. But he's also become like an advocate for, like mental health in the family. But it wasn't for him being there, and, my uncle, their father, being in the vicinity, I don't think my dad would have apologized. It was almost like he had to get called out and exposed himself for, not being like separate from it all. That's something that's, really been like angering me with my father. It's been like this whole sort of like, he wants this dichotomy of, there's this line here, we're on the victim side or the heroic side, they're the villains, they're the, the perpetrators, the pedophile molesters, etc. And it's like, it's almost like in the Dune series where Paul's like, there are no innocents anymore. I think I haven't just a line written for the miniseries, but there's a scene in there where he says that, particularly after he reveals, the Harkonnen heritage he has is, that they are a family too. They're not just our enemies and sworn enemies, and that we are them, they are us, kind of a deal, And the sort of breakdown of that, and that's kind of something that's, really been angering me with my father, is the fact that he wants to sort of think there's this dividing line, that we're on the right side, they're on the wrong side, that sort of deal. If we just, deal with this one person here, or these couple people here, like, problem solved, I mean, even if you could enact capital punishment, it's not going to really like undo the damage. Obviously, best case scenario will be for them to be thrown onto the street, dispossessed of their property, blah blah blah. Destroy that way, and not to just essentially starve, or let the streets handle them essentially. Particularly over there where there's no welfare system, there's no sort of like safety net, there's no, the poor homeless, we need to do something. Nobody even like thinks that way to actually try anything. I know we have an epidemic over here of homelessness, we sure as heck haven't solved it, if it is ever solvable, or at least possible to minimize it to a reasonable degree. But over there, they don't even recognize. It's kind of like talking about CSA, like, or SA, like, that's not even like something. That's like, wait, what is that? Sort of thing. Like, you would have to get them to a point of recognizing the term and the category, and being able to like understand its characteristics, that it even exists. That if they inappropriately touch a kid, or a girl, or a woman, or a man, or they force themselves on someone, that it's not the victim's fault, that it's the perpetrator's fault, and then that the perpetrator actually, it's their fault because they did something evil and wrong. You have to get them to conceptualize of that first before you could even have the dialogue, even have the conversation, or have or fight the cause. It's the same thing with homelessness. It's like, well, I don't know how they want to view it. What, it's the will of God or something of that nature. But yeah, the best way to seek justice would be to get the property that my grandfather left behind over there out of their hands, and then that's their only source of income, rental income, and they could be thrown onto the streets and just let the streets take care of them, so to speak. But It's like processing all of that, processing the fact that I just don't like being around my family and not understanding why, processing the fact that, for the last, like, let's say 2 decades, whenever I was struggling in life, um, I've had to contend with people, like, not just trying to undermine me and screw me over, but like folks who would just like look at my situation and go like, kind of like, what the hell is your problem? Why can't you get it together? And not being able to even discuss these things because we didn't have the words, we didn't have the terminology, we didn't have the framework. Like, I couldn't go and tell somebody that, hey, I'm being abused. I didn't even know that this was abuse. I thought I was just, I was screwed up. I had done something to deserve this kind of treatment. I really should be feeling so depressed, or suicidal ideation, or other really screwed up thoughts, or I should be so angry all the time. That's just the way it is. I should be tired all the time. I should be frustrated and depressed all the time, and angry, and anxious and scared, and that's just the way it's supposed to be. Oh, because I didn't get a A in this class, I should be, I totally deserve to get the crap kicked out of me, or because I dared to stand up for myself against my father and my mother. Oh, I totally deserve to be beaten down. Or, what, they can touch you however they want you, like you're their damn kids, kind of a thing. And not being able to sort of articulate that for so many years, and just being given so much crap by people as to like why I was still living at home, why why don't you have a girlfriend, why aren't you married, what are you, insert thus and such slur, like that sort of thing. Why is it that you're thus and such years old and you don't have kids, and where are my grandkids and whatnot? And nobody wanting to see like, hey, this is why these kids are struggling. And then my father, this is why, I haven't spoken to my cousin for so damn long. Him using my cousin as this like shining pillar of success and attainment, and going like, why the heck aren't you like him? He's graduated from college. He's got this going on. He's a successful businessman. He's he's got some girlfriend. Da 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 da. All these things, and doing the same thing to my sister, and my mom doing that as well. And I related to my grandma now, and it's like, yeah, she's like, that's so damaging. And she said, I need to go talk to some therapists. Maybe I do. I don't really want to get this stuff on any record book, and I don't think it's gonna do much good, because I think so much of the problem is just like putting an end to the abuse, period. I can heal from that if there's a huge wall built up between me and these abusers, and they can't get to me, and then I can actually move on and heal and get it together, like I've started to get it together over these last several years. But being faced with that, and realizing that the people who were giving me so much grief about all of that were the people who were the ones who were crippling me and doing all that to me. And the mantra, life didn't have to be this hard, like it really didn't. That mantra repeating in my head. I mean, I'm gonna make the best of what I got. I'm gonna do the most that I can with it, but like, man, like, and really, like, God, what else have I found out? Oh, I looked up my grandparents' home on the internet, and it showed up on a bunch of these real estate listing firms saying that the house was sold in 2021, November 2021. And I tried to run them by my grandma, and like, she's 93. I gotta cut her some slack, obviously, but like, she kind of went off on this tangent talking about the layout of the house, the history of, this, that, and the other, and I was having to keep on repeating like, grandma, do you actually own the house? Because I do remember my dad relayed to me that she had a reverse mortgage at some point. I don't know how true that was. I did ask her about that. At another point, she was like, no, I don't remember doing anything like that. But then the question is, like, why is this house coming up as saying that it was sold, a couple years ago as part of a multi-property deal or sale? And then, there's this, like, recurring theme in my family where it's like, this is why I like PMO, honestly. Like, I never drunk alcohol, smoked, tobacco. I mean, I was exposed to secondhand smoke. I hope I don't get cancer from that. It shows up in 20 or 30 years and I die, even though I did all these things right. And it was just like my family dragging me down with them. My sister and her chain smoking and all that crap. My dad's smoking around me and all that back when I lived there. But there's sort of this cycle, kind of falls into life doesn't have to be this hard, mantra, where I've talked to enough people that I know, like, I'm not in some sense unique to this. Like, I've had at least a couple of friends who are like within a year or two. I mean, they're like, yep, sounds like my family. Let me tell you a story. I'm gonna tell you a story. And then they tell the story. I'm just like, wait a minute, are you talking about my life? Because that's like almost 100% the same. But there's this sort of recurring theme or motif or like pattern of, like, somehow by hook or by crook, somebody got a paid off house, somebody got the 6-figure income, somebody got all this opportunity, and they just like squandered it. They treated their house like a fully stocked bank account they could just draw cash out of. They treated it like it was a nest egg that, well, when I get old enough, and I don't want to be in a fixed income, I'll just sell the house off and then I'll coast through on that. And then when I pass away, if there's anything left after that, they'll get that, and of course, so much of the time with some of these families, it's like they don't even get a nickel. It's not like, oh yeah, the house sold for $500K and grandma and grandpa only used $250K of that, so at least we got $250,000 minus taxes. And hey, at least you could use that for a down payment for a house for yourself, or you could use that to pay off your debts in this area or that area, or whatever. You could buy some land or something. Like, most of the cases it's not even that. But you have this sort of recurring thing of people in my family treating, like, housing like it's it's like they think it's a given that that people in the family will always be able to get a house, and I don't know what the truth is with the house that my grandparents had, because, like, man, like, if you know anything about, like, my grandpa, for instance, yeah, he had his financial improprieties when he was younger, but that was mostly rooted in I'm trying to do good by my family, trusting that his parents would appreciate what he was doing for them and they would hold their end of the bargain. And then, since everything was in his name, blah, 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 stuff, went sideways and his credit got wrecked. And, being raised in a family where if you loved someone, you would buy them things, you would just throw money away for them, and that was how you showed that you cared, or that, so there was stuff like that. But, like, after a point in his life where he, I think, got past that and broke free of that and actually got, like, a decent understanding of money, one thing he set out with, and my grandma's did as well, she was, I mean, the mortgage for their house apparently was in her name because her credit was intact at that point. But they initially, because they'd grown up, it was during the Depression, and in my grandpa's case, like, if he'd been born a generation earlier and also still been, like, the oldest son, he would have had, like, a multi-million-dollar, like, family farm, handed to him as an inheritance, because he was the oldest son in his generation, but his father was, one of the younger sons, so there was no inheritance coming to him at that point, particularly since the Depression had, wiped out so much of the family wealth. They couldn't even do, like, a cash inheritance for the younger siblings or younger sons, which you know, again, I think he still wouldn't have gotten anything because his father, unfortunately, was very much financially undisciplined and has substance abuse problems. You know, on the same order as my mom when it came to alcohol. But him and my grandma, they really had never owned their own home. I think her her parents, well, I think actually maybe her parents had owned their own home, or they might have. I definitely know his parents had always rented, and they'd, you know, apparently been evicted from places because of, you know, again, like, hey, let's go take the rent money and spend it on alcohol kind of a deal. Um, but for him, it's like, it's almost like one of his greatest accomplishments was in that day and age becoming an actual homeowner. And I don't mean like homeowner in the sense people like do nowadays, where it's, oh yeah, we bought the house. Well, did you really buy the house? Or, well, okay, we put that 20% down payment, you know, which might nowadays be, let's say, in a high cost of living area, 300K. Let's say, I think for the sake, let me see. Yeah, 300K, and we actually still owe, I don't know, 800 something K, you know, to be paid off in the next 30 years, blah, blah, blah. But hey, we're going to tell people we're homeowners. I mean, I'm not talking in that sense. I mean, like, literally, like, they paid off their mortgage. They own the house in full. They'd even put in, I guess what nowadays would be the equivalent of like 100K. Because, you know, 1950s dollars to 2020s dollars, you know, you gotta count for inflation. But they'd put that much in to like upgrade the house and that sort of deal. But they became actual homeowners, and that was probably one of his like big accomplishments or greatest accomplishments. I mean, aside from all the positions of authority and influence and, you know, so on that he held in the city they lived in, you know, city council president, you know, chief of this commission, head of that commission, president of this commission, da 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 da, you know, on this, that, and the other major, you know, like facet of city governance and, you know, things of that nature. Like, aside from that, and his, you know, service in the United States Navy during World War II, you know, post-war, it was like, you know, one of the biggest things for him was, hey, I actually own this house. And the truth is that, you know, somebody either swindled my grandmother out of the house, or she made what, you know, in her mind seemed like the best decision ever. You know, oh, I got this nest egg here, I can just sell this off and take this cash and coast on it for the rest of my life, you know. That's gonna be another punch to the gut, because it's sort of like, you know, you got all these tales of, oh, things were so hard in the Depression, you know, or you know, when we grew up, you know, even my parents and their stories as boomers about how hard they had it, and how they hardly had to work to get pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you know, stereotypical boomer stuff. It'll be yet another sort of like, you know, rock to add to that pile of BS, where it's like, you know, like, you had all of this, you could have just held on to it, you could have just lived within your means, you could have just, you know, paid your bills, paid your debts off. You could have, instead of spending all that money on booze or on drugs or on, you know, flashy sports cars, or taking, or hey, let's go take out a home equity line of credit, or let's reverse mortgage off. You could have taken all that cash, put it into the stock market, put it in a high yield savings account. Maybe you could have gotten a rental property somewhere, a handful of units here and there, you know, not talking about buying out some, you know, huge apartment complex with, like, you know, 1,000 units. I mean, a handful here and there. You'd be drawing, you know, income streams, and you could have then had property management companies, or a company, you know, managing it for you, so you wouldn't have to do all the heavy lifting, and, you know, you could have just coasted on that. Or you could have put it into silver and gold. You could have you know, like, they had all of that, and for them to just like throw it out the window, and especially in light of all the domestic abuse, CSA, etc. It's like, wow, like this is what my sister got, this is what I got, this is what my cousins got, you know, the ones who are the one or ones who have been abused, you know. It's like this is what we got in return, you know. Bunch of abuse, and it's like, you know, I mean, I hate to make it seem like it's about the money or about the property or so. Um, in a sense, it's not, because it's not like I'm saying, oh, I could have, you know, bought myself a Lamborghini, Ferrari, whatever, you know, like, or a Tesla, or I could have been, oh man, I could have been going on these vacations, with all these, like, you know, whatever, these hot babes, oh, down in Cancun, or, you know, whatever fantasy you want to paint that what you could just fund with this cash. It's not even about that. It's like you have like parents, and now it seems like grandparents who just like selfishly. Now this is a theme that, you know, like, again, I've heard similar stories from other people. I know I'm not unique in this, but it's sort of like these preceding generations who like selfishly, short-sightedly, they did things that were good for them, you know, like trying to think of an idea, like for me, like I don't know if I really have much that I could, you know, do something similar with, but it was great for them in the time being, you know, like, hey, if you don't have kids, you don't have grandkids, or you're not really giving a damn about them, yeah, why the heck not? Go get that sports car that costs $100K, you know, like, you know, it's not like you could use that money for something else, or maybe your kids could use it, or, you know, or maybe, you know, when it comes time for, you know, your end of life care, maybe that money could cover that, and you wouldn't have a bunch of freaking bills racked up and all that, you know. Like, they did these things that were in many ways, like, at the time, great for them, but they screwed their kids over. And, you know, it's like this idea that you know, home ownership for, I mean, I'm sure there's like some, you could probably point out an exact like date or time roughly when this, you know, first started off, but you know, at least in America, I mean, you know, you go back, let's say the 1600s or so, you know, whenever you want to put the timeline when America started. I mean, people say 1776, 1775, some people say 1607. Speaking in like American context, and I'm sure, I know this has been the case like in going back to medieval Europe, the medieval Middle East, North Africa, Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, South America, North America, you know, throughout the world, Oceania, etc. In some way, shape, or form, home ownership or property ownership. You know, obviously there have been nomadic societies and so on, but like, in the vast majority of societies after, you know, a certain point in history, let's just say like in terms of historic memory, I guess that'd be the best way of narrowing it down. Would be say in historic memory, home ownership has been one of, if not the main way that most people would not only accumulate wealth but pass it on through the generations. And the intention with that would be to give their kids, grandkids, etc., something of a stable footing in the world, and, you know, a leg up, and that sort of a deal. And I think one of the dividing lines between the, you know, the rich and the poor, or the rich, the middle class, the poor, the middle class and the poor, the middle class and the rich, you know, one of those dividing lines has been whether or not your family was really able to be like fiscally responsible enough, combined with obviously, like, you know, circumstances had to also present opportunities to them. So like if they didn't get the opportunity, if they were fiscally responsible, yeah, they might not get anything out of it, but you know, truth is that that if your family were one of those small percentage, you know, I think about, like, for instance, examples in, like, you know, a feudal society where somewhere along there in its development or its arc, you might have like a small class of commoners who have become manumitted from serfdom in whatever form it was, or slavery, let's say, and they ended up becoming property owners. And that was a huge thing for them to, we're not serfs, we don't owe any debts to anyone, we're not slaves, nobody owns us, and we actually have property, and we're now part of that class. And it was a step up where, like, okay, worst comes to worst, barring some major natural disaster or an invasion or somebody attacking and damaging our property, like, my kids and grandkids they'll have a roof over their head, and they wanted to stress about that. They'll have plenty of other things to be anxious and stressed out about and concerned about and working on and making efforts towards and doing stuff about and taking care of, but at the very least they'll have a roof over their head. They won't have to be worried about all that, and they can put their energy, time, money, effort towards other things, and they'll have a firm basis to build up. We've got that firm basis now. We're no longer dislocated. We got this like firm standing here, and we can kind of like launch off based off of that. We got that, and we're holding on to that, and we're not going to lose that, because we know what it's like to be landless. We know what it's like to be serfs or slaves or subjugated in some way, and like you've had this sort of pattern in my family, and it seems like in the wider world, particularly the West. I can speak to that, but I'm sure somebody from some other country or culture can go, yeah, me too, and tell their story of like, yeah, my family too, they did this, they did that, rather than this pattern of just like people like, for the first time in history, having this relatively easy access to that, which in preceding generations they had to fight for, they had to slave away for, toil for, sweat and bleed, and and just struggle for, and them being handed this and going, let's just convert this to cold hard cash, and we'll just we'll live in the moment. And if our if our kids having issues with us doing that, well, they're a bunch of entitled, lazy jagoffs, and who are they to think they deserve all of this? And so I don't know. This is what we're having to deal with, and what I'm having to face in light of all this abuse that's now being revealed to have occurred, and then I'm now having to sort of like reevaluate in the light of reevaluate my life in the light of, because now I'm seeing all these instances of abuse that I was put through, and deal with a generation or two in my family who either engaged in that or facilitated it, and then for them to have done what they done with whatever they could have left behind of a positive legacy, and for them to have the attitude of resentment, like as if they're entitled to being like that when they've done what they've done. Like, it's like, no, you're not entitled to having grandkids. You're not entitled to being taken care of in your old age, when, you could have very easily set yourself up well for that. The list goes on, So that's a lot with what's been happening outside of me taking my classes and trying to, get my sort of life sorted out and get it together and figure out what my next moves are going to be. Because, because as much as I'm working towards education and stuff, I gotta like be dealing with finances and getting on a job search, and getting any health issues I seem to be having, aches and pains and this and that, sorted out, taken care of, once I can actually get some health insurance coverage again, and trying to do my part in what is essentially a seeking of justice with regards to a lot of these abuses, but also trying to like build up a wall between myself and these folks who have abused me and want to abuse me and want to sort of like just throw a wrench in the works of my life, but yeah, that's what's been going on. And this is why I say that I had a complicated relationship with my mother, because You know, I miss her. I've shed many tears over her. I did not want her to go the way she went. I wanted her to turn around and, you know, like, and course correct and, you know, break that cycle of alcoholism in my family and become healthy and have, you know, much better life outcome and, you know, have better relationships with myself and my sister and so on, and my father, and, you know, things of that nature. But it wasn't my decision to make. And you know, I look at things now, I'm just like, you know, at 37, which is what I'm at, you know, I had my birthday, you know, recently. I'm looking at the way my life is, and, you know, the fact that, like, as much as there are bad decisions I made, like, I've blamed myself for far too much in my life. And now looking and going, like, you know, like I said, life didn't have to be this hard. And why is it this hard? Well, things that my parents who wanted or now want, you know, all this sympathy and care and assistance and all that for, and basically, in my grandma's words, wanted me to be the adult in the situation, you know, so that they wouldn't have to be. It's because of stuff they did. And you know, the blessings they were granted, the things they squandered, the abuse they committed, you know, and now thinking that they're just, like, entitled to sympathy, or people feeling sorry for them and helping them and blah blah blah, when I've got enough of my damn problems. You know, I've also learned the hard way that, you know, you don't give assistance carte blanche. If you truly, you know, get your hands on some real success in this world, you keep that to yourself. You don't, you know, open up about that to others. You don't let them in on that, because they're very likely to wreck it all for you. And man, you know, speaking of which, my cousin, he's apparently got this girlfriend who supposedly she's super religious or whatever, but she's of you know, Arab descent. And I remember back when I had a girlfriend who was Arab, and how much crap my parents gave me, and how they did whatever they could to damage that relationship as much as possible, so that, you know, a breakup would occur, which it eventually did. And I see the contrast between how my parents treated me when it came to that versus how his parents treat him when it comes to that. And this is, like, not the scumbag cousin. This is the cousin who is the older brother of the one of the victims. But I see the sort of contrast there, and how he's able to go out and do so many things in his life and blah 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 because of these things that my parents have done and what they allowed him to facilitate it. And that's kind of like what I've spent time processing, and, you know, maybe like too much time, because I've tried to accept stuff and be like, hey, you know, this is how it's gonna be, let's make the best of it. But then, you know, somebody calls you up, says it's urgent, and then they just spill all this stuff on you, and it's like, okay, what do you want me to do with it, you know? And man, you know, all that abuse, all the trauma from it, that is so much why, like, PML became such a thing for me. You know, it was my coping mechanism. It was my way of making myself feel like I was okay, like I was actually wanted, like I was normal, you know. And so much of my behavior that has turned girls off to me over the years was because of me essentially acting out on trauma around those girls, and that turned them off. You know, putting aside, like, the problems from their end, you know, things that they did that were wrong or were just screwed up or what have you. And I've had to work on it. You know, it's not my fault, but it's my responsibility. And yeah, so much of the, like, why is my life like this? Didn't have to be that hard, etc., etc., in the midst of trying to actually, like, focus my energies on things that are actually going to make a freaking difference. So anywho, that's what I'm going to leave it at now. About 3/4 of an hour of recording, and I'll upload this, and, you know, we'll call it quits at that. So if I can think of anything else, yeah, I could talk about it, but I want to make those separate videos. So anyways, I'll see you folks around. It's kind of getting warm in here. Anyways, thanks for watching. Bye bye.